Welcome to the DNA show.
DNA? Dude, are we doing a science show?
No, D is for Dennis.
Oh, A is for Andy.
And N is for and?
Oh, man, nerds.
Oh, yeah.
We're nerds, dude.
Yeah. Well, good. Then we can talk about comics and movies and pop culture and sports.
Sports and nerds. Yeah, we're going to make that work.
All right, let's roll.
Heidi ho, welcome back to Dennis and Andy Show. I'm Andy.
And this is Dennis. Welcome back.
I love saying Heidi ho. I don't know why. That's got to be something from when I was a kid. It's the only thing I can think of.
That or you grew up in the Midwest?
I did not grow up in the Midwest.
Wow.
I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in Maryland. So, no. Maybe it's from when I used to watch. Remember the TV show Hee Haw?
Everybody remembers Hee Haw.
Remember that? Did they jump out like the hay or something?
Oh, yeah.
Was it just the women that jumped out, or was it the whole cast?
The cast.
The whole cast did as an introduction.
Yep, they had some great skits on there.
They did. That was you don't see shows like that anymore.
Nope.
Oh, well.
So what are we talking about today, Andy?
That's a very good question. We just went over 10 minutes ago, and I have already forgotten because that's how my ADHD rattled brain works.
Huh. Well, I think we had talked about the fact that we went on an awesome road trip into South Carolina because the comic stores are open there. So we thought a bunch of us got together and said, it's road trip time.
Yeah, we went on, shall I say, a sojourn.
You could say that.
I like throwing out words like that to show that I know how to look at a dictionary every now and then. It's called opening my email and getting my word of the day. Sojourn.
And that was your word of the day?
That was one of them.
Oh.
So, we Dennis jumped in my car. My daughter went. We met some friends down in South Carolina, and we hit 4 different comic shops. 3 I have not been to.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. I haven't been to a few of them either, so it was great. We went to Tangled Web.
Tangled Web, yeah, that was the first one we went to.
Yep. Found some pretty good stuff there. I found some old Defenders. Problem is I couldn't remember which ones I had and didn't because my app, which has all of my lists on it, my subscription had just ended the day before and I didn't realize it, so I had no access to it. So I was kind of bummed. So I still found some oldie and goodies that I picked up. I'm like, well, maybe I got them, and if I do, I don't care. Then I have duplicates. And some of them were indeed duplicates. But I found some good Defenders there.
I actually picked up a few issues of Submariner that were on my wish list. And we're talking Submariner comics from the 1970s, early 70s issues of Submariner. I believe I picked up 31, 33, and 36. Funny thing, got home. And now I do have an app on my phone. I keep track of my comics and stuff. And I have one of the features of the app is you can do a wish list. So these were on my wish list, so I know what I'm looking for. And when I got home, I realized I already had 33. So go figure. Now I have 2. So if anybody would like a copy of Submariner 33, you know how to get a hold of me. But Tangled Web, the store itself, that was one of the ones I've never been to. It's a really nice store. It's large.
Yeah, it was good size. I liked it.
I'd say it's about 2,500, 3,000 square feet, I want to say.
Yeah, I would say it's at least that. 'Cause it's really 2 sections. I got it in a comic section up front. And then in the back, they actually have miniatures and gaming. They got Dungeons and Dragons role-playing, things like that. And it looks like they may have space in back as like part of a warehouse or a work area. But, we couldn't go in there. But just for retail space, yeah, it was good size. They had a nice selection.
You walk in, and to the left is like a little kids area I thought was cool. And when I say little kids, I'm talking, like 10 and below, maybe 11, 12 tops. And it's age-appropriate stuff, comics and graphic novels for kids of that age. They had a good selection of pops, action figures, statues. So it's not just straight-up walk-in comics and that's it. I mean, it's all comic-related stuff, but not all comic shops carry toys as well. Their new stuff was organized rather well on pretty much a side wall. Alphabetical, of course, that's pretty standard for most comic shops.
Yep.
Their back issues was pretty good. They had some dollar boxes, which I always like looking through because you can find some good deals and steals in dollar boxes. They had a few boxes of half-off trades. That made my daughter happy. She picked up a couple of Deadpool, Spider-Man trade paperbacks for half off.
I found they had some $3 boxes, and they, that's where I was kind of digging through, and I found some old Defenders, and Defenders isn't one that I super heavily collect, but the later issues have some of the X-Men in it, so I kind of was picking them up for that. But I've always enjoyed them, so I go back and, so I'm looking at the older ones. So, I picked up like some issues right in the 20s and 30s, and, Sal Buscema.
Sal was the man. He did a ton of Defenders in the beginning. I'm going to say he did them up until around the 40s, issue 40 or so, and then various artists worked on it. But it's funny because the one issue that Dennis has right here is issue 24, and I crack it open, drawn by Sal, and it's inked by one of my favorite artists who's a friend of mine now, a guy named Bob McLeod. Bob has a very Neil Adams-esque inking style, and I think, that was the school of inking he came from, and he started in the late 70s, and Bob was a guy as a kid that I always looked for as an inker, and he's also a penciler. He actually, I don't think it's a little known fact, but he's a co-creator of the New Mutants.
Yeah.
So I know he's looking forward to when that movie finally comes out.
If it ever comes out.
No, I think they released the date, I think.
Oh, for the fourth time?
Yes. Hold on. I'm going to Google it because I think I just read that since we're talking about, let's see.
I've been waiting for New Mutants because, obviously being an X-Men guy, I loved the New Mutants when they came out. I've been waiting for it, and they've, had their date, then it went away, then they had their date, then it went away, and it got pushed back. And, if they can't get it out in the theaters, it's just one of those movies that looks like maybe they just need to go ahead and pump it out, but put it right out direct to video then.
Nope, it's coming out. It is coming out in August, and let me get the exact date, August 28th.
So they have a new date.
They have a new date. They've dropped it for August 28th. Because we love going off on tangents, I will say, I don't know if you saw this headline either. If, and I really hope it doesn't happen, if Tenet, the new Christopher Nolan movie, gets pushed from July, that automatically is going to push Wonder Woman to late December.
Oh.
Yep.
Because there's a correlation?
Same studio. It's Warner Brothers, and if they push it, they're looking at pushing it to Wonder Woman's release date in August.
So that would automatically push
Wonder Woman to December. So let's hope Tenet stays on track for July.
Yeah, because Tenet actually looks pretty cool.
Yeah. Anyhow, back to the comics stuff.
Back to Sal's work. So we open it up, and this is some good old classics. So this issue's from 75. So like I said, a lot of these are from the early mid-70s. But, it's Doctor Strange, Valkyrie, Yellow Jacket.
God, I love Yellow Jacket.
Yeah, Doctor Strange. It's just, they're just good, classic fun. The Defenders were never heavy-hearted or heavy-handed. It was just an interesting group of Defenders. And it was just fun, interesting story. Son of Satan's in this particular one. Daredevil makes an appearance, Luke Cage, Hulk. So, it's just an interesting mixture, but it was good, fun stories.
Well, and they also, it was, I don't want to say they were all B-listers because they weren't, because I don't consider, even back then, in the 70s, Doctor Strange a B-lister. I don't consider the Hulk one for sure.
Right.
So, they threw in those heavy hitters, and then they surrounded them with, Valkyrie and Silver Surfer and Nighthawk.
Yep.
Nighthawk, another one of my favorite characters. So, the Avengers was more of I guess, the serious team book. The Defenders was a little more lighthearted fun. They've had a few more iterations of them. There's been a few more tellings of the Defenders throughout the years and stuff. But, it's a solid book. Sal Buscema, like I say, you can't go wrong. So anyhow, back to Tangled Web. I got my issues of Submariner from there. My daughter picked up a few things. From there, we headed over to Planet Comics.
Planet Comics, yep. Another place I had never been.
Nope. I never have been there either. It's funny, all these places are probably within, what, a 25-mile radius of each other, I believe?
Yes.
Which is pretty cool. You know,
Yeah,
it definitely
four of them pretty close to each other.
Yeah, it definitely shows that fan loyalty because if you live in that area, I mean, you could pick any one to go to, but most guys have the one that they just go to.
Right.
You know, which I think when it comes to us comic book fans, that's how we are. We pick a store and we stick with it, and then the other ones in the area we usually try to drop into once a month or so just to poke our head in, because we like to partake and, you know, spread the money around, but you have your one store.
Yep, but see, some stores will focus in on just comics, some are more toys, some are more games. Everybody's got their niche, so no two stores are alike, which is another reason why if somebody goes, hey, you want to go on a road trip to a different store, I'm always like, sure, if I can.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, they're always different. Yeah, Planet Comics, another one I went to. Now, they were a little bit different, so it's a little bit smaller of a store.
Yeah.
But they had a nice selection of comics. They had their dollar comics were in the back hallway.
Yep.
And but what was interesting about them is they have a lot of board games. A lot. So if you're a board game fan, I mean, that was impressive, just the number of board games. And I was like, oh, look at these all. So I went and kind of hung out in that area too.
See, it's funny because, like, I've never been a board game guy. Growing up in my house, it wasn't, you know, it was my mom, dad, me, and my brother, so the four of us, and I don't ever recall, like, let's do board game night. I know we had them, but we just never really, like, once a week, let's have a board game night or whatever. So, I think it's really cool to see that there are so many board games out there still. I mean, I had no idea.
Yeah.
It's really mind-blowing to me because I always think of, you know, digital stuff now, and what is replacing board games is all you hear about are, you know, PlayStation this, Nintendo that, you know, what computer game this, you know, so on and so forth. That honestly, if you would have asked me, I would have been like, are board games still a thing? But they are still huge.
So board games themselves are, so like even my wife and a bunch of her friends, they're into like Ticket to Ride. And yes, you can play a digital version, but they really enjoy getting together. And then places in town, like Waldhorn, you know, they have board game night. Well, normally they have a board game night, and where all these people get together and they bring their own games, and they just take out the back room and they get together just to play board games. And you get to know some of them as you go more and more often. So, you know, it's a really fun thing. And then there's also a type like on the superhero side, you know, they've got like Hero Clicks and things. I used to be an envoy for WizKids back in the early days, where I went down to Gen Con and stuff like that. And those are fun because they're not only superheroes, but they're done on large maps. A lot of fun. So you've got your traditional board games, and then you've got your like miniature board games with like the superhero stuff. And then also for like Dungeons and Dragons, I'm actually typically doing Dungeons and Dragons. I did a 6-year campaign right before we moved here, and now my friends are getting back and they're like, we need to do another campaign. So they've got digital versions where I can do it. I still use books, but we can do stuff online. So to see these stores that carry the role-playing stuff, the board games, the comics, I mean, realistically, all my fun stuff's rolled up into just these stores.
See, it's funny. I never played D&D as a kid. I got the Marvel superhero one as a kid because Marvel.
I still own the original box set from the 80s.
I do too.
Yep, I love it.
I have it in my back room stored away, and inside of it, there are little character sheets I did for heroes I made up and stuff.
I bet you did.
Yeah. I don't remember the names of any of them, but I still had that stuff. Board game-wise, as a kid, the one that really comes to mind that I remember playing was Risk.
Yeah.
The original Risk, because that came out in the 80s.
Yep.
And I just remember that game taking like forever.
Yes.
You know.
So we had Risk, back then there was just plain Risk. There wasn't all these fancy versions.
That's all it was.
Risk, and then we had Axis and the Allies, which was the World War II recreation of the games. So between those, we could play all weekend. We'd go up to my friend's boathouse and literally take over the boathouse, and we'd set up the games and play all weekend. It was either that or Dungeons and Dragons.
So what I'm hearing is, when Dennis was a kid, he didn't know what girls were. That's what I'm getting from this.
You know, there's a bit of truth to it, because back then a lot of girls didn't do this. Today,
oh man, today,
I mean, half of the people that do the board games are girls. Half of the people that do the role playing game are girls.
Dude, even in the comics, like, you know, all joking aside, you know, I was a comic book nerd as a kid. I was like the only one in high school. I mean, there were a couple of us that hung out that read comics, but generally it was like, oh, look at those dorks over there, you know?
Yeah.
And now, and even when I got into the business as a professional artist in 91, you went to a comic convention, it was, you know, 85, 90% dudes.
Absolutely.
And if there were girls there, they were drugged to the place because, you know, the boyfriends would probably be like, no, seriously, after this, we can go wherever you want to go. Pick a store, we'll go. But you just got to give me my time here at the comic convention. And then we'll go to dinner. I'll take you to a movie. You know, whatever you want to do. But just give me this. And now you fast forward to, I think I really started seeing it blow up in the early 2000s. And now, of course, you know, I go to Comic Cons as a guest. You see lots of girls walking around by themselves, thumbing through back issues. And I just think it's so... Well, my daughter, she's 17. She reads comics, and it's cool.
I remember back in high school, my comic book shop, so there was one in town, which was awesome because it was an arcade that was... comic book shop on the first floor, and second and third floor was a video arcade.
Oh, sweet.
So literally could go there on a Wednesday, and it was $5 all you could play video games, starting at like 3 or 4 o'clock, and you could do it for 3 hours. So I could walk in with $5, go upstairs and play video games, come down, and before I left, do all my comic book shopping. It was awesome. And then one of my other favorite stores was up in Oshkosh, so it was 20 miles north in a different city. But it was a big store with tons and tons of comic books. But again, there were only a couple of girls. So I will make a reference and I'll post a link to it. There's a really funny one because it was mostly guys, but every once in a while you'd see a girl walk in. And then there would be that really hot girl that would walk in.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a song out there called Hot Girl in the Comic Shop by a group called Tripod. So a bunch of nerdy guys who sing very well and love to make music, they literally make a song about it. There's a hot girl in a comic shop. And it's great. But it was true. There just weren't very many.
If you want to know what comic book kids looked like, a la Dennis and I in the 80s, just watch Stranger Things.
Yes.
Because those kids,
it's true.
It's pretty much what I looked like in the 80s. Wearing that type of clothes, all those references and stuff. I mean, that just nails it.
Yep.
The comic shop I went to, because I grew up in Maryland, there was one by where my grandparents lived in Silver Spring called Jeppy's. Now, if you're into comics, you know that name, Jeppy.
Sure do.
He's the owner of Diamond Comics, which is the main distributor for comic books to all the stores.
And he owns a museum up in Baltimore, Jeppy's Museum.
He owns a museum up in Baltimore, but he owned comic shops in the 80s, and that's where I actually met, when I was a lad of, I believe, 12 or 13, I met Jim Starlin and had him sign my copy of The Death of Captain Marvel, which is Marvel's first graphic novel that came out in the early 80s. And then you fast forward to, you know, the early 90s when I'm working and I actually meet Jim and work with Jim at Marvel and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, Jim and I are friends now, and it's just, that would have blown my mind at 12 going, hey, 12-year-old kid, I'm you from the future. Guess what? You know, you'll know him and be friends with him and work with him. So,
and then you wake up screaming, you throw a pillow over your head.
That's right. So it's funny because I did a panel with Jim at a convention a few years back, and I often would tell Jim, well, when we actually first met, and he'd go, when? And I'd say, in 1982, and he'd go, what? And I'd go, yeah, I was this 12-year-old dork kid that came up to you with the Death of Captain Marvel at Jeppy's comic shop, and you signed it for me. So
yeah,
he loved that story because I made him feel old. So, but another fun story is going back to how it wasn't the popular thing to do when we were kids. And I won't mention the two creators, but I was talking to a comic book creator, and both these creators started their careers in the 70s. And they went to high school together. And one of them would say that, one of them was the cooler kid out of the two. Another one was, but they're both in comics.
Okay.
Right? One of them was the closeted comic fan, the cooler one. And I remember him telling a story of his buddy that came up to him and was like, dude, did you see the latest, blah, 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 Marvel comic or DC comic that came out this week? And the other one was like, the cooler one was like, shh, hey man, down low. Can't let my friends know I'm into this stuff.
Yep.
And this is when they were in the high school in, the 60s and whatnot. So I'll just leave that out there. Like I said, I'm not going to name who they are, but they're two classic comic book creators. One of them's retired now. The other one is still working, but they're prominent creators. So I'll just...
But realize it was a subculture back then.
Was.
It wasn't. And you couldn't. So I got a funny story on that. When I lived in Texas, I was actually, I was singing on the church choir and stuff like that.
Right.
Yes. We had a praise team and a choir, and I was on both of them.
Right.
But I remember walking into choir, and it's just habit. So in Dungeons and Dragons, we had played in the world called Forgotten Realms.
Right.
And they have a particular meeting, and it's well met. And you just get used to saying it because everything we did playing Dungeons and Dragons, it was in the Forgotten Realms. So I just remember walking into the setting for choir for the first time, walked in there, and they all like, hey, and I'm like, well met, everybody. And all of a sudden, one guy from the back, he kind of peeked his head up. He kind of looked over at me. And then when I went and sat down, he came over and sat down right next to me in church. And he kind of looked around. I'm like, hey, what's up? He introduced himself, and I introduced myself. And he goes, do you play Dungeons and Dragons? And I'm like, I do indeed. How did you know? And he goes, you said well met. Whoa, did I? I didn't even realize I said that. It is. And he's like, hey, we play every week, and we're always looking for somebody. And lo and behold, literally, they only didn't play. We played every Friday night down in Texas. And for the couple of years I was down there, they always had a Halloween party. So there was one and another party. So there were always two. So they literally played 50 times a year. So I literally played Dungeons and Dragons every week for almost 2 years straight with friends, all because of church.
Now, you know what cracks me up about that? The first image that came to mind when you said that dude peeked his head from the back and you said, well met, was the scene from Avengers, the first Avengers movie when, was it Tony Stark that made a reference? Somebody made a reference when they were in the SHIELD helicarrier and Captain America goes, hey, I got that one. I understand that one. Remember,
No, the baseball card. Was it the baseball card?
No,
it was
the flying
reference.
monkeys. It was the flying monkeys.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Was it Stark that said the thing about the flying monkeys or Banner?
Banner, wasn't it?
I can't
I think
remember.
it was Banner.
In the
But
first,
yeah, I know what you mean.
It's so funny because the first Avengers movie, 8 years ago now.
Yeah.
But so they're all sitting around in the SHIELD helicarrier. It's it's like their first group meeting, and it's Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, Black Widow, Captain America, Thor, Coulson, Nick Fury, and they're throwing around these references, and Captain America doesn't get any of them because the dude's from the 40s. He's too old. Or he hasn't been around, I should say, when these references came about. Then somebody says flying monkeys in reference to Wizard of Oz, and Cat goes, hey, I got that one!
And see, I'm thinking Coulson because he had those old collector's cards from Captain America. And goes, hey.
Oh my God. So back to Planet Comics. We always circle back, don't worry. I like the store. Like you said, that store was basically, I'd say, 60% comics, 30% games, and like 10% pops. They had maybe a few action figures, but it was mostly pops and the toy side of things. Their back issues, I'd say, look, honest assessment of the store. They had some nice wall books. What I mean by that is almost every comic shop behind the counter has a wall, and on the wall they display their top dollar comics. Some of them are graded and, graded.
Slabbed.
We're not going to get into a big definition of what that is. If you'd like that, go back to one of our previous episodes. We talk about what that is. So that store, Planet Comics had, maybe 30 books on the wall behind them. Other than that, though, they basically had, dollar books? They didn't really have a good back issue selection, though.
Yeah, if you're looking for just regular back issues, it wasn't a super huge, but you can see what their niche is. And again,
right.
I enjoyed it because it was a different type of store, and I was like, So if I ever needed anything from a board game wise or something that wasn't, typical run-of-the-mill ones, they have a lot of very unique ones.
I definitely hit them. And, newer stuff, you've got nothing to worry about there.
Yep.
From there, we went to
Richards. Yep. And of course, now realize we know a lot of these guys from the conventions because, they set up at cons around the state and the area and stuff like that. So love Richards. He always sets up at the conventions and stuff, and got to go to his store because it was just up the street.
I never knew he had a store. So we're like, where are we going next? Richards. I'm like, okay, never been there. And I walk in, and lo and behold, Richard, the guy behind the counter, the owner of the store, is, like Dennis said, a guy that sets up at all the local conventions in town and, South Carolina and North Carolina surrounding areas. He always a dealer there, and that's where I knew him from. I never knew he had a store. His store, decent size. I'd say at least 2,000 square feet, maybe 2,500. Great selection of comics, action figures, pops, good selection of back issues, I thought, and not just, back issues going back 30, 40 years. Nice selection of that stuff. Obviously, if you're a comic shop, your new stock is always well. And I take it back. Some comic shops will only carry the big, Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, the big companies. Some comic shops, they just get, they opened up the catalog and they're like, get everything.
Yep.
Richard, he's a little in between. Obviously he has all the major company stuff. He has some of the smaller company stuff too, which I thought was cool.
But he also had a good mix of other stuff. So one of the things that he had that we hadn't seen at the other places, Richard has on the wall, so you can see the wall books and stuff, and he's got a lot of stuff on the walls going around. But above that, towards the top, he's got actual original artwork.
Yes.
And so Richard really has a lot of decent original comic panels and artwork from different artists, and he deals in that, and that was really cool. I mean, just to walk around and see some of the originals that he had.
Yeah, it's like, out of all the stores, his is the only one that is kind of like a gallery, too. So if you're interested in original comic book art, you can definitely stop by Richards. And this is in Greenville, South Carolina. They're all in the Greenville, Spartanburg area. So Richards did have, lining the top of the walls, original comic art, which for me I think is cool because I do it for a living and I collect comic art and I love looking at it.
Yeah.
So that's another great aspect to look at.
And he had some other cool stuff, so I wound up... I always looked for different comics, and I didn't find any of the comics that jumped out that I didn't own or that was an upgrade. But he had something cool there, so I also collect the Star Trek Eagle Moss ships. And my wife already says I have way too many.
Well, you gotta explain what Eagle Moss is.
Eagle Moss, so yeah, there's... they recreate the ships. And there's a lot of Star Trek ships over the different series over the years. They're a smaller scale, but the detail is absolutely phenomenal on these models. So, like I have all the different versions of the Enterprise. The original ones from the TOS, the 60s original series, the different versions. I even have the Phase 2, which was going to be the new show, and they wound up not doing it, and then it converted into the motion picture, and as well as the Enterprise B, C, D, E, all the different iterations thereof. So, I probably have 80, 90 of them, and you used to be able to subscribe to them. Well, I'm starting to run out of room. My wife's like, you don't need those anymore. I'm like, So I don't just subscribe, but I will find cool ones.
Sure.
So he had one that I had not seen even released, and it was from the Doomsday Machine from the original series from the 60s. And it's the big planet killer that goes around, has this anti-proton beam that, breaks apart planets and eats it and refuels itself. So it's been around for centuries, and it just keeps moving on from planet to planet, from system to system. And it's not quite in the same scale, but it was a beautiful, well done piece. And I'm like, oh, I don't have that one.
So wait, so most of these are about what, 6-7 inches long?
Yeah.
I'd say. So the Planet Killer one, is it in scale to those?
No.
As in it's,
no,
because it'd be huge.
Yeah, it would literally have to be like 3 feet long or bigger in comparison.
But
it's still bigger.
But the other ships are in scale with each other.
For the most part, like your main starships are in scale.
Here's a question I've always had about Star Trek: the main, the original series ship.
Yep.
Looking at it now, the big disc, obviously, is people walk around in the big disc. That's where quarters are. Everything is up in that big disc, right? Now, after the big disc, you've got that connects to the long cylinder shape down below by, a thin shaft or whatever. You can go up and down in that, right? Like there's an elevator up and down that to get to the lower part.
They're turbo lifts. So
in the lower part,
yep.
Are there living quarters in that lower part? Like what's in that lower part? There are.
Yes, of course. There's
I have no idea.
A standard...
I honestly have no idea.
Constitution class, for the nerds out there that are Star Trek, houses about 428 personnel on it. So think of it kind of like today's aircraft carrier with a lot fewer people, but, big like that. So you've got your primary hull, which is the saucer, and your secondary hull, and then you got your 2 warp nacelles, which are the things that you see sticking over the back, the long
Those don't house people. Those are just like engines.
Those are your, right. Okay. And then, there's turbo lifts that go from the bridge, which is in the very top, down and stuff. I actually have, the Starfleet technical manuals that actually list. I have the blueprints for all of them, so you can actually see, what's in it. So for those of you who have ever seen Galaxy Quest, which is a spoof on the Star Trek universe, when they're in emergency and they wind up calling up all their friends as they're on a real ship, and they're like, get everybody online. I don't have these maps, because they literally do have maps of all of the interiors of the ships as well as the exteriors and what's on them. So, yeah.
Where's James T. Kirk's quarters?
Well, it would be in the officers level. So Spock's and everybody would
So
be
they're up in the main disc?
They're down in the main.
They are.
Yeah.
So nobody's actual living quarters are on the main disc.
They've got a lot of different things, because you've got astrology, you've got medical, so you've got the warp engines, which are different from the nacelles, because you've got the engine room. The back of the ship is where the shuttle bay is and stuff like that. So when Gene Roddenberry was creating standards for the ship, there were certain things that he wanted in every single ship. So the fun fact about it is, when they originally were drawing up the plans and they came up with blueprints for what the Enterprise would look like, originally, the way we know the Enterprise now, flip it upside down. That's actually what the original plan was to have it look like that.
No way.
Yeah, and the
exact same ship, just flipped upside down.
Really? Basically, right. The really earlier one, instead of the disc, they had it as a great big ball, like from 2001: Space Odyssey. Yeah. I think what they came up with was phenomenal. So anyway, I collect all of those, and I even have the larger Diamond, the Diamond series. And those ships are much, much bigger with detail, and they light up and make sounds and all that kind of fun stuff. So, yeah, that's kind of one of my fun things.
That's cool.
And Richard's got a great selection of those things. So, yeah, I wound up buying a really nice one from him.
Well, I know. You were eyeing it, and I'm like, well, just do it, man. Do it. So you did.
I know, but I was like, my wife's going to be upset. But I'm like, I haven't even seen this one out yet, so yeah, I just better.
Dude, your wife only gets upset if you tell her.
You say that. She will realize it. She has this radar. If I were to buy something and just go stick it on a shelf, she'll be like, hey. And it might not be that day, but it'll be like a week later. She'll be like, That's new. Like when I came home with the brown tribble, because I've got the different tribbles.
Right.
And I came home and I'm like, oh, I've never had this brown one. So I stuck the brown one, put the batteries in, threw the packaging out and everything, and stuck it right up on the shelf. She went in to go reading in the room, and she's like, hey, that tribble wasn't here before. What? What? What are you talking about? Yep, she knows. I can't hide anything. I'm just better off telling her.
There's got to be payback to that. Like, you got to be able to walk in the bedroom, walk in the closet, and be like, hey, I don't remember those shoes. How much those cost us?
She doesn't collect anything. So we are complete opposites. She used to do Precious Moments from way back when, but she doesn't collect anything. But she really doesn't complain too much. So,
all right.
I'm a comic book guy.
My wife's a shoe person. That's why I brought it up. Because she'll be like, I need a new pair. And she can listen to this and give me crap. I don't care. Because she'll be like, I need a new pair of flats for work. And I'm like, oh my God. Every time we leave the house, you literally say, I need a new pair of flats for work. What do you wear them once?
Yep.
And they're worn out?
Yep.
Come on. I always thought the shoe thing with women was just a joke. But my wife loves shoes. I'm like, look, I need a pair of sneakers.
Yep.
I need a pair of sneakers. Like, okay, so I've got sneakers for the summer, lighter weight.
Yep.
Sneakers for the winter, they're a little bit heavier. That I can literally wear out in the snow and pouring rain because they're waterproof and everything, but they look like sneakers. And I've got like casual shoes. I've got dress shoes that I only wear when it's like, get the suit out.
Yep.
Fine, dress shoes. That's about it. I don't need tons of shoes. And it's not because, well, you work at home, you don't go anywhere.
Yep.
I just don't.
Well, we did one other stop on that particular day. We were like, well, so right up the street from Richards.
Right up the street.
Literally.
Like, we're talking, you could walk to it.
Couple blocks. Borderlands.
Borderlands, comics, cards, and games.
Yep.
Or is it just, yeah. The owner of Borderlands, a friend of ours, Rob Young. He is also the owner and promoter of South Carolina Comic-Con, which has been going on for a decade now.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Love going to SC Comic-Con.
Yeah, he's growing it. So if you like, just a plug, if you like good old-fashioned Comic-Cons that are just comic artists and writers and all comic books, South Carolina Comic-Con, Heroes Con, Baltimore Comic-Con, those three are just solid comic book shows. And then there's smaller ones as well. Charlotte Comic Con that happens 3 times a year. It's a one-day show. Anyhow, not to get on to a different subject. So Borderlands, it's obviously full on comics, new comics. His back issue collection is rather large.
Yep.
So you can generally find what you're looking for. Trade paperbacks, hardcovers, how-to books, huge gaming section.
Yeah, I'd say board games, Warhammer. So I mean, they've got miniatures. It was a pretty good sized store. It's been a while since I've been in it.
It's about 5,000 square feet.
Yeah, it's always a good sized store, and I always wind up finding stuff whenever I go into Borderlands.
It's very well run. I mean, all the stores are, so I don't want to make it sound like Borderlands is...
Right.
They're all very well run.
Yep, and all the guys were nice.
Rob's store is, with it being as large as it is, he has multiple employees working there, so very, very nice staff to greet you when you come in. I would say, if you're looking for it, Rob probably has it. And he actually took Dennis and I over to his new space because he's moving. Hopefully, the virus stuff hasn't set him back too far. Hopefully, by the end of summer, he'll be in his new space, which is a whopping 16,000 square feet.
And when you say that, because I remember talking to him a few months ago, and when he was talking about he had to put on, new roof and all this kind of stuff, and he was explaining the space, and in your mind, you're picturing, wow, 16,000.
Yeah, you hear it, but you can't.
It's big, and you're like, that's going to be pretty impressive. But when we walk in and you actually see how much space 16,000 square feet is, plus how high it is,
yeah,
I was blown away. Just absolutely blown away.
Yeah, I mean, it's still under it's a freestanding building, but it is a standalone, so he won't be in a strip mall or anything. He'll have his own building. It is, it's huge. He's going to have a huge gaming area. He was saying he's going to have big TV monitors up and stuff. He's going to have internal warehouse, which the warehouse itself is probably the size of his old store, square footage wise,
but way taller.
So generally, once he's in this new store, if you're looking for something, he won't have to go to a separate warehouse and tell you to come back. He can probably just be able to go in the back and find it, because he, like I said, he has a ton of stuff. So I look forward to the grand opening of that, and to hopefully do a future signing there.
Yeah, that is definitely going to be a road trip to head up there, because the gaming side alone was like, wow, and he's going to have all these tables up to set up for gaming, and then the comic side's just as big. I'm like, what? It's going to be huge. I mean, the sheer volume of back issues, new stuff. I can't wait to see how it looks. So he's in there, they're in there painting and getting the walls put up, and it's already looking, you can already see how it's shaping up. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal.
And, the one thing that he does do, that none of the other stores do, is if you really are into gaming, Magic, Dungeons and Dragons, Warhammer, he has gaming nights. Not every night of the week, but 2 to 3 nights a week, even in his new store, or his old store, the current location. He has gaming nights that you can drop in, doesn't cost you anything, so pop right in and have a gaming night. And that was it. That was our outing for Saturday. We were gone pretty much all day.
Yep.
Went to a restaurant after that. Had some pizza outside. Social distancing practices in place and all. And it was a really nice day. Fun to hang out with the guys. See them again. We were all masked up properly as we should be.
Yep.
And
but it was a great time. I mean, we all found really cool stuff. Everybody filled in holes in their collections, no matter what it was that they were looking for. It was a great trip.
Yeah, it was fun stuff. And all the stores we mentioned, be on the lookout. We'll be billing you because we just basically promoted all your stores. So you gotta pay to play, if you know what I mean.
But no, it was a great trip. If you get a chance to go over to the area, realize you've got all these shops within a small, if you come to Charlotte, there's a lot of great shops. If you go over there, you got a lot of them within a real nice little driving distance.
So we'll run them down one more time before we sign off. You've got Tangled Web, Planet Comics, Richards Comics, Borderlands Comics, Cards, and Games, all within a 25-mile radius, Spartanburg, Greenville, South Carolina area. If you're in town, drop by any of them. You will definitely find something you're looking for.
Yep. So take a road trip, go support your local comic book shops, and enjoy.
Yeah, check them out on Facebook, too. They do mail order. And until next time, hang loose. We'll see you later.
Goodbye, everybody.
Until next week, grab your 3D glasses.
Get your favorite comic books, roll them up, and put them in your back pocket the way you should treat comics.
Throw your pigskin up on the mantle. This is Dennis.
This is Andy. Later, friends.